This evening is Steve Maloney. He is working from the CC Manual, Conflict Communicator Manual, project number 10, Inspire Your Audience. Timer, the time is 8, 9, and 10. Do we at times in life end up living lives according to the expectations of society and of others? Do we sometimes have unrealistic dreams about how things could be different? Please welcome Steve Maloney with Life is Precious. Life is Precious.
I once heard a story about a kid. This story was told, if I can remember correctly, by a guy named Dan Hawkins. And he talked about how this kid, in his early teen years, one day, while the teacher was asking all the students what they wanted to be in life, he said, contrary to what everybody else was saying, most people were saying, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a mechanic, I want to be a nurse. He said to the teacher, I want to be an entrepreneur. And the teacher said, well, that's kind of strange, but what do you actually want to be? What kind of an entrepreneur? What kind of profession do you want? And he said, I simply want to be an entrepreneur. And the teacher said, you have to be realistic, though. You have to know what you actually want to do. And the young guy stood there strongly and said, well, I've seen dream stealers before, and that's okay if you have your opinion. A few weeks later, the same thing happened at the guidance counselor room. All the students were given scheduled appointments with the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor asked the boy, what do you want to do in life? And the boy said, I want to be an entrepreneur. And the guidance counselor said, yeah, but what do you actually want to do? What profession are you going to be? He said, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And the guidance counselor said, well, you know, boy, you really have to be realistic. You have to know what you want to do. And the boy said, I've seen dream stealers before, sir. That's okay if you have that opinion. Fellow Toastmasters, I want to talk to you tonight about how life truly is precious. And that sometimes we end up living the expectations of others, or the expectations of societies, because we're told that we have to be realistic. Yet deep down inside of us, there's often a yearning, a dream, which is precious. It's what we were meant to live. Deep down inside of us, there's a yearning for freedom and self-determination. This reminds me of a movie which exemplifies this to the extreme. It was called Easy Rider, where Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper were riding their choppers through the Southwest and the Badlands, where freedom